Hi, I'm Niels Johnson. I'm a technical evangelist with Symantec, and this is one in a series of videos I'm doing regarding the risk landscape. My intention is to develop this running commentary on the risk landscape. Right now I'm putting these sort of preliminary things together so we get sort of a baseline to start from. But this particular video is about what I call infrastructure strain. This is about the existing environment as many of my customers, at least if I have spoken to them, find themselves in, and it basically describes their starting point as they start moving down this road of progressing towards where they really need to be to keep their environment secure and their information available. So, infrastructure strain, what exactly is that? You know, what has caused that to occur? Let's define that a little bit. Frankly, infrastructure strain comes as a result of literally years of a business working philosophy that says to IT, and typically this comes from the people who are higher up in the org chart, who are concerned about top line revenue, or more importantly the impact on bottom line. This year you will do more with less. Well, okay, that's fine, but after a while you've got to pay the piper, and so what we're finding now is that indeed, there is some catch up that needs to occur. The point is that in this day, there are systems that are not necessarily out of date, but certainly not where they need to be. There are processes that are not necessarily out of date, but not where they need to be. Infrastructure strain comes as a result of where the environment, the working environment, is today, and what the possibilities really are and the disparity between those two. Frankly, one of the more significant gaps is the gap between where IT is and its appreciation for the threat landscape or the risk landscape, and where that landscape actually is today, and the technical expertise to understand the difference between the two. So frankly, I'm going to take that on as quote-unquote the weakest link. The best illustration I have for that is a conversation that goes on between the CFO and the CEO. One day the CFO walks into the CEO's office and he makes what appears to be, at least at the front end, a very legitimate question. What if we invest heavily in our IT staff and they leave? And the CEO thinks for a minute and says, what if we don't and they stay? Yeah, so I want you to just stop and consider that for a moment. And so let me do a bit of a disclaimer. This is not a negative commentary on IT. Frankly, the biggest issue with IT is all the different areas that they have to have areas of expertise in, and the workload necessary or the investment necessary in having a legitimate appreciation for where the risk or the threat landscape happens to be. What we're seeing over the course of time is the technical expertise of the bad guys, the folks wearing the black hats, sort of progressing along at a logarithmic rate, and IT moving forward, but certainly not moving along at the same rate. Therefore, there seems to be this widening gap between where the bad guys are technologically, what they're trying to accomplish, and where IT is in its capacity to appreciate what's actually going on. The dissemination of what an attack looks like. How do I go about figuring this stuff out? And what we're seeing, frankly, is more and more a dependency on this knowledge component, this information from the outside feeding to the inside as becoming more and more critical. So let me give you a sense of where the bad guys are. And frankly, I have to be perfectly honest in the interest of full disclosure, this is actually a very dated slide. This slide is where the bad guys were about 2 years ago, and this is early in 2015. What we were seeing 2 years ago were the bad guys taking their development cycles or their development talent, their development pools, and breaking them up into 5 separate areas. The first team, or subset of their development teams, would basically do reconnaissance. In an earlier video I said that in 2013 the security industry discovered 6,787 new potentially exploitable vulnerabilities. Well, those holes are in your environment. This team is basically writing tools that will very automatically ping your environment to see if one of those potentially exploitable vulnerabilities is there. This is 2015. Now, they're doing exactly the same thing, probably at another order of magnitude with respect to speed and technical expertise. But the point is, when they find an environment with a potentially exploitable vulnerability, they then pass that information off to a secondary team, the incursion team, that will write code specifically to exploit that hole inside your environment. Once that is done, once the hole is there, they run some analytics. And one of the analytics that they run is, okay, is there data in the clear? If you saw one of my earlier videos, you saw the whole, hopefully you heard the whole bit on encryption and the need for encryption. If the data isn't encrypted, if it's in the clear, they basically pass that information on to the discovery team. If the data is indeed encrypted, why bother doing any more development cycles, right? So once they've gained access, they're inside the environment, they pass that off to the discovery team. The discovery team then writes code, or will go about the process of mapping the asset. Let's figure out what is here, what's good, what's bad, what can we capture. Once that is done, they pass that on to a fourth team that writes code specifically to capture that asset or take control of the asset, and that comes in one or two or three places. They're either going to encapsulate it and prepare it for exfiltration, or they're going to hide it off on some obscure server somewhere, whatever that happens to be. And then lastly, the fourth or the fifth team is going to write code to do one of two or three things. One, they're either going to go in and grab this block of data or these data repositories and pull them back out through that hole and make a whole bunch of noise because it's a one-off, a bull in a china closet. We really don't care how much noise we made, and if we're discovered, that's fine. Or two, they're just going to drive a tap into it like a keg of beer, and we're going to bleed it because it's the gift that keeps on giving, and they're going to bleed it until you discover it. Or three, if they're socio-politically motivated, their purpose is just to overwrite or corrupt that data repository because all they wanted to do was to bring you down to begin with. The whole point here is we're not talking about one kind of coding or one particular attack vector. We're talking about 5 separate blocks of code. They're doing 5 separate things externally and internally to your environment. And here's the point, and maybe this is the most germinal point as far as this particular video is concerned. Again, this is about understanding what's actually going on and how today's processes perhaps are quite disparate from the old processes found in a particular environment. What you're seeing here, there's those 5 areas or those 5 types of coding along the left-hand edge, and the kinds of technology, not specific product, but the kinds of technology across the top that is needed to determine what's going on and how to resolve those issues or define and mitigate those risks in those particular spaces. And so, again, we're not talking about specific products, but we're talking about products or technologies that are working in concert with each other, that are integrated to whatever degree they can be. And probably most germinal to this particular presentation is the far right-hand column. It's all about intelligence. It's not about speeds and feeds and bells and whistles. It's about intelligence. What does the technology know to look for? That's, in this day, it's a hypercritical receivable if the internal IT staff is not capable of delivering that intelligence from within. And so it's right here that I want to interrupt myself again, and I do this every now and then. I want to kill a term in your thinking. I want to bury an idea in your thinking. I think the worst thing that a security sales rep can say to a customer in these days is, my product is best of breed. I think best of breed as a label or as a qualifier, frankly, simply needs to go away. And now let me tell you why. When I use the word best of breed, what happens mystically and magically is that we all take this sort of mental excursion to the upper right-hand quartile of a Gartner Group Magic Quadrant. And for my technology to get into that quartile, I have to address speeds, feeds, bells, whistles, and functional specifications. And the truth is, in this day, it is so not about speeds and feeds and glossy, shiny objects. Today, it's about intelligence. Today, I don't care how fast your stuff is working. If it doesn't know what to look for, you have a problem. So, right here, I have to stop and pause and acknowledge the fact that the bulk of my audience is geeks. And so that's why I choose to use this as my illustration. For those true geeks who are paying attention, you know that this is the Starship Enterprise from the television series 1.0. So, you're the commander of the Starship Enterprise, and for whatever reason, you need to blast yourself across the galaxy, and you want to do this at warp drive. I've been asking some of my audiences, what's the fastest speed that the Starship Enterprise can fly at? And I got back all kinds of answers. As it turns out, I looked this up on Wikipedia. As it turns out, during season number 1, the fastest it ever flew was warp 14.1. And I guess the producers decided that was too fast, and from that point in time on, season 2 and following, warp 10 was as fast, it was theoretically as fast as it could fly, but warp 10 was perfection, and so warp 9.9 is the right answer. All that said, I'm sorry, you're moving along at warp 9.9. Here's the point. If there is not something going before you, if there is not some sort of sensory information, if there's not some technology that's looking far enough out ahead to see something that you need to either move around or push out of the way, that thing is going to pass through the fuselage of the Starship Enterprise faster than Scotty is going to be able to save the dilithium crystals. Today, it's not about what you have or how fast you're moving along. Today, it's about what do you know that is coming, or as importantly, what do you know that is here. Today, I believe, Symantec believes, frankly, we believe that the delivery of knowledge is as critical a deliverable as technologies. The point in all this is, it is so not about speeds and feeds and bells and whistles. If you're counting on speed these days, I would ask you to rethink. So, if it's not about speeds and it's not about feeds, then what is it about? Again, if technology is only as good as the knowledge that sits behind it. And the label that I want to put on all of that is actionable intelligence. Not, don't just dump a bunch of logs into my lab. Help me understand, let's disseminate what all that stuff is and give me the mitigating steps. Once we've taken all these logs, once we've taken all this information, once we've got a sense of what's happening on the outside and compared to the inside and seen the disparities between those two, what steps do I, as an IT person, need to take to either protect my environment from what has already, from what is going to happen, or how do I go about resolving the issue that has happened and get myself, how do I right the ship again? Today, if I were sitting where you were sitting, my question for partners, for suppliers, for vendors in any form is, tell me about your knowledge component. Tell me about what I can expect from you as far as actionable intelligence is concerned, because, again, today, that's the bridge between where IT's appreciation is today for the risk/threat landscape and where it actually is. The truth is, IT in this day doesn't need to do all the heavy lifting. They shouldn't have to do all the heavy lifting. It takes too much to understand all that and to interpret all of that. Your burden should be placed upon a vendor who gets that. So, the last word. I'm going to come back to this concept of actionable intelligence many times during the course of this series and show specifically not only where it's needed, but the specific kinds of intelligence that's needed. I hope this particular video has been of help to you. Again, I would covet comment, response, positively or negatively. I'm just at the beginning of putting these things together, and so any comments you would leave would be much appreciated. Again, I thank you for your time and your attention.